My daughter demanded my $2.6 million beach house, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You owe me this, Dad." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hesitate. She said it the way people state facts, like gravity or time. Like it was something I should have already accepted. What made that moment unbearable was what had happened just days before. I wasn't invited to her wedding. No envelope arrived at my house. No call warning me ahead of time. I found out the way people find out they no longer belong somewhere, by accident, through someone else's excitement. When I finally asked her about it, she didn't pretend. She didn't soften the truth. She told me my presence would make people uncomfortable, that it wouldn't fit the image she and her new family were trying to present. I listened. I stayed calm. Before I tell you what I did next, let me say this. If you've ever given your entire life to someone and then realized they only wanted what you could provide, stay with me. This story doesn't end the way you think it will. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I did something else. My name is Daniel Robert Hale. I was born in 1971 in Bakersfield, California, and I didn't come into this world with a safety net. My mother died when I was 6. My father disappeared not long after. From that point on, life became a series of temporary places, group homes, foster houses, rooms that never quite felt like mine. By the time I was 14, I understood something most people never have to learn so early. Stability is not promised. If you want it, you build it yourself. At 15, I started cleaning floors at a local auto shop after school. The smell of oil stuck to my clothes. My hands were raw by the end of each shift, but every paycheck meant I didn't have to ask anyone for anything. After high school, I joined the Navy. Not because I dreamed of it, but because it offered structure. Predictability. 8 years of discipline rewired how I thought. I learned logistics. I learned patience. I learned how small, consistent effort compounds into something unbreakable. When I got out, I used my GI Bill and earned a degree in operations management. No ceremony. No applause. Just progress. I started at the bottom of commercial logistics. Long hours. No glamour. By my mid-30s, I was managing properties. By 40, I was buying into them. Warehouses, distribution centers, modest retail strips, assets no one bragged about, but everyone relied on. I didn't chase fast money. I chased certainty. By the time I turned 60, my net worth crossed $7.8 million. Not through luck. Through restraint. My daughter Emily never saw that struggle. She grew up in clean houses and safe neighborhoods. When she was 8, I bought our first real family home in Pasadena. When she was 16, I bought her a car. When she went to college, I paid full tuition at a private university out of state. No loans. No stress. I wanted her life to be easier than mine. And it was. Slowly, I noticed changes I told myself were normal. She corrected the way I dressed. Asked me not to tell certain stories around her friends. Smiled tightly when my past came up. I told myself it was part of growing up. Part of success. I didn't realize she was learning something else entirely. She was learning how to cure it. Things shifted when she met Ryan. His family had old California money. Real estate holdings, private clubs, quiet confidence. Polite but distant. They asked what I did for a living, nodded quickly, and moved on. Emily adjusted herself around them. Then she started adjusting me. "Maybe don't talk about the Navy," she said once. "It doesn't really fit the vibe." The wedding planning happened without me. Dates were chosen. Venues booked. Conversations held in rooms I wasn't invited into. When I finally asked her directly, she chose a cafe in Santa Monica. Neutral. Public. She folded her hands and told me the truth. That I wouldn't fit. That people would judge. That it would be embarrassing. I nodded. I paid the bill. I went home alone that night and sat in my kitchen until the house felt too quiet. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't an accident. It was a decision. And decisions change everything. The invitation never came. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. Mail gets lost. Addresses get mixed up. People planning weddings forget things. I wanted to believe that, because the alternative meant accepting something heavier. Weeks passed. Nothing. I checked the mailbox more than I needed to. Not because I expected to find an envelope, but because I wasn't ready to admit what its absence meant. Then I heard the date for the first time. It wasn't from Emily. It wasn't from Ryan. It was from a former colleague of mine whose wife sat on a charity board with Ryan's mother. He mentioned it casually, the way people talk about weekends or weather. Big Malibu wedding, right? He said. 3 days. Should be beautiful. I nodded like I already knew. That was the moment denial stopped working. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. I didn't call Emily right away. I needed to hear it directly from her, without excuses forming in my head for her. So I waited until she asked to meet. She chose a cafe in Santa Monica. Neutral ground. Public. Controlled. The kind of place where people talk quietly and keep their emotions contained. She arrived on time. Well-dressed. Composed. I realized then that she had rehearsed this. She ordered first. I waited. Then she folded her hands on the table and looked at me with the kind of expression people use when they believe they're being reasonable. "Dad," she said, "we didn't think it would be appropriate for you to attend." Asked her why. She sighed, not angrily, but impatiently, like I was forcing her to explain something obvious. She said Ryan's family cared a lot about image, about presentation, about the kind of people they surrounded themselves with. She said there would be donors, business partners, families with expectations. Then she said the part she hadn't planned to say out loud. "Your background makes people uncomfortable." I didn't interrupt her. I let her keep going. She said my past didn't align with their world. That questions would come up. That people would ask things she didn't want to explain. "We just don't want that energy on our day," she said. That was when it landed. She wasn't worried about them judging me. She was worried about them judging her. I sat there quietly while the noise of the cafe filled the space between us. Cups clinking. Low conversations. Someone laughing too loudly a few tables away. I realized I had become something she needed to manage. A liability. I didn't remind her who paid for her education. I didn't list sacrifices. I didn't raise my voice. I nodded. I told her I understood. That answer seemed to relieve her. She relaxed slightly, like a weight had been lifted. I paid the bill. I wished her well. I walked out alone. People think silence means weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to see things clearly. The wedding happened without me. I didn't mark the date on my calendar. I didn't need to. I felt it anyway. That morning, I woke up early and sat in my living room while sunlight moved slowly across the floor. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't call anyone. Later, I saw the photos online. Emily in white. Ryan smiling. The Pacific behind them, calm and endless. People congratulating them in the comments. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. It was as if I had never existed. That absence did something to me. Not anger. Clarity. For the first time, I stopped seeing Emily as a child who needed protection. I started seeing her as an adult who had made a calculation. And I understood that whatever came next wouldn't be accidental either. It would be intentional. That thought stayed with me long after the photos stopped loading. And it prepared me for the call that would come soon after. The call came 9 days after the wedding. Not a thank you. Not a check-in. Just a normal ring on a quiet afternoon, like nothing had happened. Emily's voice sounded light when I answered. Relaxed. Almost cheerful. She asked how I was doing, the way people ask when they already assume the answer doesn't matter much. "I'm fine," I said. That word carried more weight than she realized. She didn't mention the wedding. Not once. No acknowledgement of my absence. No explanation offered after the fact. It was as if that chapter had already been closed in her mind. Instead, she talked about how exhausting everything had been. The planning. The expectations. The pressure to get things right. She said weddings cost more than people realize. She said starting married life came with responsibilities. Then there was a pause. A deliberate one. "Dad," she said, "you know you have that beach house in Ventura?" I didn't respond. She continued anyway, filling the silence the way people do when they're uncomfortable with it. She said the house sat empty most of the year. That it didn't make sense for something like that to go unused. She said she and Ryan needed space to settle into married life. Somewhere appropriate. Somewhere that matched where they were headed. Then she said the sentence that reframed our entire relationship. "You owe me this." She didn't say it angrily. She said it with certainty. I asked her why she believed that. She sounded surprised by the question, like the answer should have been obvious. She said I had always provided. That family helps family. That this was just the next step. She reminded me how much she meant to me. How hard she had worked. How much pressure she was under. She mentioned Ryan's parents. She said they expected them to live at a certain level. She said the beach house would help with that. The property she was talking about wasn't a sentimental place I'd inherited. It was a strategic investment. A $2.6 million oceanfront house I'd bought after decades of restraint, planning, and delayed gratification. It represented years of choosing discipline over comfort. And she was talking about it like it was already hers. I told her I needed time to think. That answer unsettled her. She said other fathers wouldn't hesitate. That this was what support looked like. That she didn't understand why I was making things difficult. I listened. I didn't defend myself. When the call ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. Because now I understood something clearly. I wasn't excluded from the wedding because I embarrassed her. I was excluded because I no longer fit the version of herself she was presenting to the world. But my assets still did. That distinction mattered. I sat alone in my living room for a long time after the call ended. No television. No music. Just the quiet hum of the house. I thought about how easily she had separated me from what I owned. How comfortable she was doing it. That comfort told me more than anger ever could. I realized this wasn't about emotion. It was about access. And access, once assumed, is rarely given up willingly. I didn't call her back that day. Or the next. Instead, I started paying attention. Because when words stop making sense, behavior tells the truth. And what I was about to notice would remove any remaining doubt about what this demand really was. I didn't respond to Emily right away. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted clarity. Reacting quickly had never served me well. This wasn't about emotion, it was about understanding intent. I started paying attention to what she and Ryan were doing. Her words had painted one picture. A family under pressure. Struggling to start life together. Tight budgets and stretched resources. But what people say and what they do are often miles apart. The first signs came from social media. A weekend in Napa. Photos of private tastings. Designer luggage. Laughing at sunsets with people I didn't recognize. Then came the subtle markers. Ryan posting about golf lessons at a members-only club. A new watch. Subtle. Expensive. Not the trappings of struggle. The curated signals of comfort. I didn't confront. I didn't comment. I observed. I started cross-referencing. Bills. Trust documents. Property records. Beneficiaries. Emily's name appeared in places she shouldn't have needed access yet. Questions about transferring the Ventura house into an LLC. Preliminary inquiries. Not permissions. Just questions. That's when the pattern became clear. Emily and Ryan weren't in need. They were insulated. They were calculating. They assumed entitlement because that's how she had been raised. Always provided for, always shielded. I remembered small moments I had brushed off before. Seating arrangements at engagement parties, subtle requests to avoid sharing photos, introductions without context. Not the warmth of a daughter and father. Just presence as required. Their public display of life versus the supposed struggles painted a stark picture. Luxury rented residences. Private clubs. Expensive dinners. And still, Emily asked for more. I didn't feel betrayed. Not yet. I felt focused. Because now the demand made sense. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. She wasn't asking if I would give. She was planning for when I might. I spent hours reviewing every detail. Past gifts. Expected inheritances. Tax implications. Legal structures I had put in place. Every asset I controlled. Every expectation she could leverage. I realized that what she wanted was not love, not connection, not gratitude. She wanted access. Control. And once intentions are clear, emotions stop clouding judgment. I didn't rush to make a decision. I didn't need to. I watched. I waited. I understood. And I knew exactly what I would do next. I didn't call Emily back immediately. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. Anger would have turned this into a fight. And fights blur clarity. Instead, I scheduled meetings. One with my attorney. One with my accountant. One with myself. The attorney's office was quiet, neutral. Glass walls, long table, soft lighting. No emotion. Just facts. We reviewed the estate plan line by line. Every trust, every clause, every asset. What I had promised. What I had assumed. What I was no longer obliged to provide. Do you feel respected? My attorney asked. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. The answer was changing my next steps. I had always planned for Emily to inherit the Ventura Beach house. Eventually. Not now. Not this way. Undoing that plan would cost money, taxes, restructuring, lost time, but keeping her access meant surrender. I chose dignity. I chose clarity. I chose to separate love from entitlement. I restructured the assets. Legally. Quietly. No confrontation. No cruelty. Access removed. Boundaries placed. The decision was mine, not theirs. I did not disinherit. I did not punish. I did not humiliate. I simply protected what was mine and what could not be leveraged against me. It was a controlled, strategic step. Walking out of the attorney's office, I felt a relief I hadn't expected. Not victory. Not revenge. Quiet authority. The decision was final before Emily even realized a conversation had happened. She believed she could persuade me. She thought time favored her. She didn't know the foundation had already shifted. That night, I sat at the Ventura house. Ocean breeze. Sunset fading. The silence carried weight. It wasn't loneliness. It was clarity. Control restored. I realized something crucial. Life had taught me patience. Discipline. Observation. That day, I finally exercised it fully. The first real control I had over a situation where someone I loved attempted to use me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I simply existed within the decision I had made, calm, confident, resolute. And I knew that soon, the next phase would begin, where silence turns into revelation and the consequences become visible. The meeting was set in a conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Glass walls, a long table, neutral lighting, quiet hum of air conditioning. No one there to fuel drama, no one to soften reality. The space itself demanded focus, precision, calm. Every person present felt it. Emily arrived with Ryan. Confident. Smiling. Polished. They assumed this was a routine meeting, a formality. Their posture said, "We know the outcome already." They were wrong. I stayed seated at the head of the table. Not fidgeting. Not angry. Observing. The patience I had cultivated over decades now held me steady. My attorney began speaking. Calm, precise, measured. He explained that after recent inquiries, a review of my estate and trust arrangements had been conducted. Assets were being reallocated. Future distributions would go through independent trust structures. No property transfers would occur outside those structures. Every word deliberate. Neutral. Unemotional. Then he mentioned the Ventura Beach house. I saw Emily's smile falter. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Then it disappeared entirely. She tried to interject. "This isn't what we discussed," she said. Her voice pitched just enough to betray discomfort. "This isn't fair. Family doesn't operate this way." Her words were defensive, rehearsed. Ryan shifted in his seat, glancing at her, then back at the attorney, uncertainty creeping into his posture. And then she said the words again, louder, in front of witnesses, "You owe me this." The tone was calm but insistent, as if stating a fact, not a request. The confidence behind her entitlement was startling. Years of cultivated expectation condensed into that one sentence. I spoke once. Calmly, clearly, without anger. Support does not mean surrender. Love does not require erasing someone. I will not fund a life that expects me to be hidden. Her eyes widened, a mixture of shock and indignation. She hadn't anticipated resistance so absolute, so calm. She cried then. Not quietly. Not a private heartbreak. Public, visible, unrestrained. She accused me of choosing money over family. Of being cruel. Of punishing her for daring to ask. She believed she had a right to my life, my assets, my unquestioned compliance. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words did more than I could have. They revealed who she thought I was supposed to be. A resource, not a person, a conduit for her convenience, a stepping stone rather than a father. Minutes stretched. The tension in the room thickened. Ryan looked between us, uncertain. He had been complicit, but he had not anticipated the firm refusal, the calm authority I exuded. His posture reflected the first cracks in their shared certainty. I stayed seated, breathing slowly, watching the subtle shifts. Emily's expression moved from outrage to disbelief, from disbelief to fragile recognition that her assumptions had been challenged. Every subtle twitch, every shift in weight, spoke volumes. After what felt like hours but was only moments, my attorney concluded the meeting. All questions had been addressed. No need for further discussion. Emily and Ryan left. The air between us changed. Their confidence had slipped. They were no longer certain of outcomes they had assumed were theirs. I walked out of the building afterward. Downtown Los Angeles beneath me. Sunlight hitting glass towers, reflecting the city's rhythm. The chaos of the world continued outside, but inside me, there was quiet. Authority. Clarity. Boundaries respected. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift. Not triumph. Not revenge. Not satisfaction in anger. But the profound, unshakable calm of a parent who had finally asserted control, not for punishment, but for dignity. Walking to my car, I reflected on how subtle power shifts can be. How quiet decisions, enacted with clarity, resonate far beyond the immediate moment. Emily's entitlement had been visible, her confidence intact, her assumptions absolute. And yet, without confrontation, without anger, without humiliation, the foundations she relied on began to crumble. That evening back at home, I sat by the ocean at the Ventura house, watching waves lap against the shore. The sunset painted the horizon. Silence enveloped me. Not loneliness. Not victory. Just clarity. Control restored. Peace slowly settling in. The public reveal was complete. The exposure, absolute. Emily and Ryan now had to adjust, and the realization of their miscalculation would ripple in their actions, their words, their expectations. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Because true authority is quiet, and justice, when earned, does not shout. It simply exists. And in that quiet existence, I found something I had not felt in years. Real power, grounded not in emotion, but in clarity and resolve. The days after the meeting weren't explosive. There were no dramatic confrontations or shouting matches. Consequences often arrive quietly, in the space between expectation and reality. Emily's calls became cautious. She no longer assumed access. Her voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a careful edge. She asked questions where she had once demanded. She phrased requests as options, not obligations. Every word, every pause, revealed uncertainty she hadn't experienced before. Ryan noticed too. Subtle changes in conversation. Slight hesitation when discussing plans. A flicker of awareness that their assumptions no longer held. The veneer of control they had projected to the world was shifting, and it was visible in minor details. A pause before speaking, a careful glance at me, the careful framing of sentences. I did not engage in arguments. I did not explain the rules. I let them discover at their own pace the consequences of their assumptions. My silence was deliberate, controlled, and powerful. Sometimes authority is not loud. Sometimes it is simply present, firm, unyielding. I watched as their perception of me changed. Emily no longer treated me as a resource. Her tone in calls was measured, polite, and uncertain. Ryan's attempts to manage the dynamic failed quietly, and it was evident he realized the assumptions he had relied on were flawed. Their life together remained intact, but their control over me, and by extension my assets, was gone. In the weeks that followed, I noticed shifts in how they managed expectations elsewhere. Small signs, careful wording in emails, measured requests, a pause before making assumptions. Their friends and family noticed it too. I was no longer a figure to navigate around but a person whose boundaries had substance and permanence. I spent more time at the Ventura house. The ocean became a quiet observer of change. I watched the tides roll in, understood the rhythm of patience, and felt the stability that comes from measured action. I volunteered at a local orphanage in Los Angeles County, not as an act of proof, but as a reminder of the roots from which I had grown. Stability, discipline, and clarity mattered more than compliance. One evening, Emily called. No requests. No expectations. Just a conversation, cautious and tentative. She asked about my day, genuinely listening for the first time without anticipation of gain. Then she said, quietly, I didn't realize how much I took for granted. I paused before responding, because accountability spoken softly carries more weight than apologies shouted. I acknowledged her words, not with anger or judgment, but with calm presence. The lesson had been delivered, not through confrontation, but through the clarity of boundaries and the quiet enforcement of respect. In that period, I understood a profound truth. Love does not vanish when you set limits. It clarifies. It distinguishes genuine connection from conditional expectation. I had not lost my daughter. I had removed the illusions she had built around entitlement. And in doing so, I gained something invaluable: peace, authority, and dignity that no one could challenge. The consequences were not dramatic. They did not arrive with a bang. They arrived in measured shifts, in careful words, in recalibrated expectations. And as I sat once more at the Ventura house, watching the horizon, I realized that the most powerful outcomes are often the quiet ones, fully earned and silently observed. Months passed. Not in leaps or dramatic explosions, but in quiet, steady progress. Life moved forward, subtly, without fanfare, without the urgency of conflict. And I observed it all with calm clarity. Emily and Ryan were still married. Their carefully curated world continued to function, their social circles maintained, their public appearances polished. But something fundamental had shifted. They no longer assumed access to me or my assets. They no longer framed decisions as if I were a tool to be used. Distance had brought honesty where assumptions had once ruled. I spent more time at the Ventura house. Not to prove a point. Not as retaliation. Simply to breathe, to live, to enjoy what years of patience and discipline had built. Mornings were quiet. The ocean air carried clarity. No expectations. No negotiations. Just the rhythm of the waves, the steady motion of tides. I volunteered at a local orphanage in Los Angeles County twice a month. Not as a gesture to be noticed, but as a reminder of the beginnings I had left behind, of the roots of stability, and of the difference between provision and indulgence. The real shift, however, came from Emily herself. One evening, she called, not with requests or expectations, but with curiosity. She asked about my day, genuinely listening, without assumption or entitlement. And she said something she had never said before: I didn't realize how much I took for granted. I paused before responding. Accountability spoken softly carries far more weight than apologies shouted. I didn't lecture. I didn't argue. I simply allowed the moment to exist, to settle, to teach without confrontation. In reflection, I realized something profound. Love does not disappear when boundaries are set. It clarifies. It distinguishes the genuine from the conditional. I had not lost my daughter. I had removed the illusions of entitlement she had built. And in that process, I gained something invaluable: peace, authority, dignity. I once believed that being a good father meant always providing, always saying yes. Now I understood that true love often requires knowing when to say no. When to preserve respect over ease. When to let boundaries define the relationship more than resources ever could. The months that followed were unremarkable to an outsider. But to me, they were monumental. Quiet mornings, purposeful work, subtle interactions, and deliberate patience had all combined to restore equilibrium. The lessons remained clear. Respect is not optional, even in family. Love does not demand surrender. And the quiet authority that comes from patience, observation, and controlled action is stronger than any shouted victory. I had finally achieved it: peace, clarity, and a grounded sense of moral and emotional authority. The betrayal, the exclusion, the demands, they had all taught me more than any compliance ever could. I looked out at the ocean that evening. Waves rolled in with the same patience and persistence I had cultivated. And I understood fully that stability, respect, and dignity are earned quietly, maintained carefully, and held firmly, regardless of who asks, expects, or assumes. The story was over, but the lesson endured. Love must be anchored in respect, and respect must be non-negotiable. Even in family. Even for a parent and a child.